Space for Giants were an international conservation organisation based here in Kenya, and our focus is on ensuring elephants and the landscapes they depend on have a future. So we've got 4 programs. One's frontline protection, the other one's human-elephant conflict mitigation, especially trying to stop elephants from eating people's crops. The third is habitat protection, securing space, which is the whole sort of reason I set up the organisation about 10 years ago. And then finally, we've got one which is called conservation education. It's really trying to transform people's perspective of elephants, both here but internationally. I was actually invited here by a girl when I was 16 years old, so it's all a pretty girl's fault, actually. And I fell in love with the country. I fell in love with the wildlife, the people, and I just kept coming back. And that turned into an undergraduate thesis, and that turned into a master's degree, and then that turned into a PhD, and then I did a postdoc all around this whole issue of the relationship between people and elephants. So it's been a sort of very single trajectory for most of my life now, and all based here in Kenya, mainly up in North Kenya. The reason for the summit was in North Kenya, particularly around Laikipia, elephant poaching suddenly emerged. It wasn't really an issue during that entire time I've been there. So for the 15 years I was up there was not really a problem. And then in 2010, the elephants that we had collars on started turning up dead. They've been shot with AK-47s and by poachers. And so we realized there was a problem. It wasn't just one elephant that was wearing a GPS collar, it was 3, 4, and then suddenly we were firefighting everywhere. And no one really had the capacity to deal with this issue up there. So I managed to convince the Old Pejeta Conservancy at the time, who had a very good rhino protection unit, if we could invest some resources in training them to a higher standard, the highest standard possible, and then getting access to airplane resources, and then working very closely with the judiciary to look at how people who were arrested in wildlife crime were being prosecuted and sentenced. And through that intervention, we had a 74% reduction in illegal killing of elephants in 1 year. And as of last year, it's a 94% reduction in the places we work. And so I was trying to see how we could scale up this intervention. And I approached Evgeny Lebedev, who's the owner of the Independent Evening Standard, and said, could he get behind the cause? And he agreed to. And through him and with him, in partnership with him, we approached some of the most committed African leaders on the continent as far as conservation is concerned. So we started off with President Bongo in February last year, and then we talked to President Kenyatta, President Museveni, and finally President Kama in Botswana, and all of them agreed to get behind effectively a club that would combine political muscle, financial muscle and technical expertise to deliver a solution for elephants forever. And that's the reason behind the Giants Club and reason behind the summit. But this is the first one. So President Kenyatta agreed to host it here. He offered to host it here. And so this is the first opportunity to bring those political leaders together and the business leaders and the conservation community, particularly the experts on frontline protection, and agree on concrete actions that get resourced at the summit. We'd like, our ultimate objective is to provide effective protection to 50% of Africa's elephants, which is about 200,000 individuals, slightly less now. And fortunately, those 4 countries alone have more than half of Africa's elephants. So what we want is we'd like the 4 leaders to stand up and make commitments that are tangible. So clear commitments to activities that can change the situation for elephants and other wildlife. And after they do that, we want donors, individual philanthropists and corporates to stand up and say, we back you. And we have that combination of a political leader standing up and saying, I'm doing this, and then people with cash and resources and social capital to stand up, we back you, Mr. President. We've done something extraordinary. That's what we want out of the summit. This whole process has been about engaging the wildlife sector, particularly the government national wildlife authorities, to see where the capacity gaps are. The Kenyan Wildlife Service is a fantastic organisation on the continent, but it hasn't got its own internal prosecution unit. So helping the Kenyan Wildlife Service have a prosecution unit, its own in-house prosecution unit that can actually go out and follow up cases and do case management, ensure people are arrested, get charged appropriately, would be a massive outcome, and it's a very low-hanging fruit. So that's one example of an activity we'd like, for example, President Kenyatta to commit to. Fencing, making sure that elephants aren't raiding people's crops. You know, there's 163 kilometers of fence in central Kenya that would have a massive impact on people's livelihoods if it was put up. So we'd love to see the President stand up and commit to that. And then a special operations unit. I think, you know, the sorts of challenges that rangers are facing in the field now are very severe. I mean, and they're under-resourced and I think not trained to the capacity necessarily to deal with that threat, because it's very severe. I mean, you know, the people that are involved in wildlife crime now are heavily armed. They belong to dangerous criminal syndicates. Managing that requires special intelligence, requires very well-trained units. We'd like to see a special operations unit committed by the President to this country to help deal with this threat. There are countries where there isn't the political leadership and commitment to deliver frontline protection. And so if you focus on the winners, then you'll win. But actually there are some places, it doesn't matter how much money you've got or how many good ideas you have, if there isn't that political leadership at the very top, it's a losing battle. So I think that's really why we have to keep real and a bit more pragmatic than just saying we're going to solve all of Africa's elephants' problems. We're not. Many elephants will keep dying, particularly in Central Africa, particularly in parts of East Africa, because in reality it just isn't a priority for the guys on top.